When you and I were in our early teens, we remember that the record format most commonly found was 33 1/3 long plain records that were delivered in cardboard sleeves, about an A by an A. On the front was a picture and a description of the contents, and on the back was some descriptive material, typically, something that tells you about the contents of the record. And those are called liner notes. Well, this very brief thing that I'm doing now that you're watching, I'm going to call video liner notes for a particularly signal piece of music. That music is Prelude on Malabar by Leo Sowerby, a Chicago church musician and composer, famous in his day. This piece, Prelude on Malabar, is really exceptional, still today, even though it's 75 years later. Well, I have some notes here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about choral preludes, like Prelude on Malabar, just a little bit, don't worry. And I'm going to try to demonstrate how Sowerby's harmonization is very modern and very different from a standard harmonization. And I'm going to play the first page of the piece with the music, the 3 lines of music on that first page, showing as my fingers are stumbling around playing it. Might be curious. And then it all ends with a full performance in a large church setting with a large church organ. Shut up. A large church organ, so that you'll be able to hear the piece. And I have some notes here, but I don't think I'm going to use them. I'll just do it off the cuff. Let's get started. You may remember I started off by saying that Prelude on Malabar was a great example of chromatic harmony. You may have asked yourself, what is chromatic harmony? Well, it's a practice of using a heck of a lot more notes in building chords than Bach did in his day, for example. From the Gregorian chants, you go all the way up to Bach, the master, and then you go forward from there and you get into chords that would just be looked upon as total mistakes. To Bach's ears, probably some of these modern chords would sound like a cat had landed on the keyboard. But let me give you a very brief example of traditional harmony and chromatic harmony. I'm going to use the first line of Prelude on Malabar. First, the traditional way that tune is harmonized, or at least harmonized by me. You've probably heard that in church a million times. Not that tune, but those sets of chords and chords like them. Now let me show you how Sowerby, I've extracted the very essential notes from the way that he harmonizes it and weeded out all of the other frou-frou. So this is the way he harmonizes that same melody. I actually played one wrong note there, but I bet you can't tell me which one it was. There are so many interesting, rich dissonances here that it moves and it gets to a landing zone, a comfortable place, by completely different means. In our early days, we had chords like this. Very simple. and there were no real dissonances in there. Then there were chords like this. And that next to last chord, I added an F, which is the 7th of the dominant here. And that is a dissonance, and it makes it a nice place to land. It's comfortable. But in 1937, Paul Hindemith wrote a tremendous treatise on the theory of music, called it the craft of musical composition. And he described why, to our ears, the unresolved neighboring tones and the anticipation notes that didn't seem to go anywhere in Chopin, why our ears accepted them. It was the principle, it's what I call it, the principle of hammer on your head. Having your head hit with a hammer feels real good when it stops. And when musicians, composers got the idea, I'm going to put something really rough and follow it by something very sweet, that gives you a resting place. The music moves from to this. It's a very simple concept, but it explains a lot of stuff. Let me give you one example. Let's suppose we have a C major chord. If I add a dissonance to that, that's C sharp way up above, and then I add still another dissonance, the F sharp tritone down below, from this awful sounding chord, I can follow it with any other chord. That's a triad. That is an ah chord. Let me do that again. Let's do A major to D. So it doesn't matter what key I started out in. When I get to this chord, I can go to any other safe chord in any other key, and your ear will say, wow, I'm glad that bad chord is over, and accept it. There's B major. There's just no limit. So chromatic harmony says, I'm going to just put all kinds of notes out there, and I'm going to move you along by moving you from a rough, tense place. That's the word that Hindemith used. These chords have great tension, and then when you follow those chords by something a chord that has less tension, it's a relief. And you can move the listener along from a place of tension to a place of repose. And here in this example of the traditional and the chromatic harmonization, let's listen real close to some of these notes in Sowerby's harmonization of this hymn tune. That's a diminished chord. That's a major 7th chord, minor 7th chord, and that is just a chord. There is a real nice major 7th chord. I like that one, and it comes down to a chord of a bit less tension, even less tension, a regular minor chord, and then he sort of has a coda here. He extends the cadence like this. Doesn't that last F chord sound good? But all these other chords before set up this nice F chord to be a relief. Let me try that one more time. lot going on there, and that final cadential F really does sound good. A lot better, I think, a lot more dynamic than up here in the traditional thing. Goes. Our ears have heard that a million times, and they know what's going to happen. But in the Sowerby, it's a surprise every other note practically. So there, chromatic harmony, traditional harmony. Leo Sowerby's piece, Prelude on Malabar, is based upon a hymn tune named Malabar. But it's not the same sort of choral prelude that in the olden days of the 17th and 18th centuries that people expected and that church musicians wrote. Back in those days, most of a church's audience couldn't read the written word, much less read music. And churches couldn't afford to buy hymnal books for everyone. Paper and books were just too expensive to be supplied in such quantity. So, when it came time for the congregation to sing a tune, the organist would play a rather fancy and fully ornamented version of the first line, and then he would immediately play a very simplified, direct harmonization of that first line, and the audience, the congregation, were expected to sing along. Then the organist would play a fanciful version of line number 2, followed by a very simplified basic harmonization of line number 2 that the audience was expected to sing in. That's what a choral prelude was for. You know. There is one piece of music which is pretty famous and almost everyone knows, Jesu, joy of man's desiring. Bach wrote this originally as part of a cantata, but we know it as an independent, freestanding piece on its own. And if you remember how it starts with triplets, but then it all of a sudden it cuts to a very strict, simple section where the words can and should be sung. So that's an example that you all might know about. Sowerby is a modern composer, so he took a portion of the hymn tune, the first 6 or 7 notes of the hymn tune, turned them upside down and shortened them so that instead of quarter notes they are eighth notes, and made that an imitative, almost fugal theme for his prelude. Let me show you how Sowerby grabbed the first few notes of the original hymn tune and used that as the thematic material for his prelude. Now, the original hymn tune goes like this. Pretty simple. Sowerby turned that upside down and it goes like this. One more time. That's the original. The ups and downs are reversed. That's how he did it. Only he didn't have a bird to help. Okay. Now we're going to see and hear how Sowerby uses that new theme that he derived from the original in his composition. It starts off, and that theme can be heard throughout the entire piece. I'm going to play actually I've already played it, the very first page of the 6-page piece with the camera set up so that you can see my sausage fingers play, and at the top I've video edited in the 3 lines as I am playing. So I hope you enjoy that. He does it. Okay, you've heard my performance on this electronic keyboard with an organ stop on it, and what you heard was a lot more than you're going to hear next, which is the full piece performed by a professional in a large church on a large organ. You'd think that would be better, right? But no. In these large auditoriums, large church spaces, you have so much reverb and echo that everything in the middle, below the soprano and above the bass, gets mishmashed into a wall of sound. And trust me, the inner voices in this Sowerby piece are fantastic. Rich dissonances that suddenly resolve into wonderful consonances. You know what I mean. In any case, when I first heard it, it was in a church, and it was impressive enough for me that I have kept the manuscript of this piece with me since I heard it in 1963 at an Episcopal church across the street from the main campus of Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. It's a fantastic piece, even when it's played in the environment it was meant to be played in. I really hope you enjoy it.